What's going on, everybody? It is CGA Sports over here on the CGA Got Game channel. Welcome back. We're going to touch on that other subject again that we touched about recently, and that is the situation with Rachel Richardson, the Duke volleyball player, who accused some fans at BYU of racially heckling her throughout a 2-hour volleyball match. Now, a lot of things have happened, but I was one of the first people after watching Jason Whitlock and actually him reviewing an article of someone immediately calling this out to be a hoax. I was one of the first persons to put out a video related to this as a hoax. And now you're seeing a little bit of handling this with kid gloves by the media, the woke media and woke technology, unfortunately, because we live in a country right now that is basically overcorrecting from the past racial histories in the past, right? We have a very negative history in America. We never really dealt with it. And now you're seeing an individual like Rachel Richardson basically doing the same thing that many white women had did in the past that cost people their land. All right. People specifically like Fannie Taylor in Rosewood caused a lot of collateral damage. It caused and led to a lot of people's deaths, and specifically black men. Okay. And also led to companies losing executives and all of these things when you talk about the Me Too culture, and a lot of those things turning into allegations that really weren't quite true. All right. And here's another situation of a young black woman who got caught up in the hype of her lack of performance during this very competitive game, in which I believe BYU was a ranked volleyball team. And Rachel Richardson did not perform well, unfortunately. And now she had to find an excuse to why she was not performing well. And this was the first thing that she can come up with. Now, let me just tell you, this is why I titled the video, why I believe Rachel Richardson did what she did. Now, I'm not excusing anything that she did. I think it's absolutely reprehensible. And I think she should be punished. She should lose her scholarship. She should be able to have withdraw from Duke University. Absolutely. But what I know as a person that has coached in the college levels for some 15 years, traveled with young women, on basketball teams, and been on the road with them in very tough circumstances, field arenas, very supportive fans for the home team, and you get caught up in the emotions of the game, in which sometimes you don't perform very well. All right, sometimes you can't hear yourself think, you can't hear yourself talking over the crowd, and there's a lot of things going on that you're really disoriented. This young woman's 19 and a sophomore, so she's one of the youngest members of this team. And she's coming in to where she's a starter. I don't know if she started the previous year, but she's a starter. And sometimes you get caught up in the emotions and the hype that if your performance doesn't live up to the standard that you are set for yourself, that your team members depend on, and also your coaches expect of you, guess what? You have to find a reason. And sometimes that reason is not as obvious as this one. So Rachel Richardson in this situation had a very obvious reason or an excuse to point to, in which she probably felt uncomfortable, right? She felt uncomfortable. I don't know where she's grown up, but many times, not many people are comfortable with the majority of the 6,000 people that are in the audience being all white. You might have a adverse reaction to that. You might feel like, wow, I'm the only one here. I'm all by myself. Even though she was not all by herself, there are other members of the Duke volleyball team that are African-American. And there were other members of the BYU men's basketball team there, African-American men themselves. Hold on for a second.
Yeah. Look at my African-American over here.
Yeah.
Look at him. Are you the greatest? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So in this situation, there were more people there than she actually thought, but these people weren't in the supportive role, and they weren't going to back her up because of her performance, right? Her performance was getting judged. Maybe the coaches were being critical of her. And because of that, she had to lean into an excuse, right? I'm not performing well. All right. I'm letting my team down. I'm letting my coaches down. I feel bad for myself. There has to be a reason for this. And this is what I'm going to point to. Now, is this a contrived effort by her? Did she go there intentionally to say, I'm going to set up a racial hoax? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think this was a reaction, and this is the first thing that she can come up with. And I think she was groomed to do so because there was a group that had already presented opportunities for her to basically be vigilant against racism. All right. There's a group that met with her, and I broke this down in the previous video. That was a group that met with her and the team, and they were talking about be sensitive, be hypervigilant to racial issues. And I think it was in the back of her mind or right at her subconscious to reach for this in this situation. So here's the end tale of the story. Here's how this story has turned out. All right. This story has gone completely bonkers. And the media and all of these people who were very, very outraged by this story. Okay, we're gonna go through those people. They are silent on this one. All right, they are absolutely silent. And we're gonna talk about what kind of damage this can cause and why she should be penalized. She should absolutely be penalized because we have to teach people lessons. All right, so let's get to this point right here. All right, so let's start right here. Okay, first and foremost, which again, going back to my experience as a former college basketball coach, when I heard the story, it seemed outrageous to me. First of all, I used to live in Utah. I know that this is probably some people never experience Utah, right? You never experience something quite like Utah, in which it's pretty much all white. All right, most places you go, especially BYU, Provo, it's kind of off the highway, but it's not around a whole bunch of things, right? So you're kind of isolated out there, and there's going to be a lot of white folks there. If you're not used to that, or you don't have that experience, you may assume that all of these people are racist, right? It would be an obvious attacking point. And I'm sure BYU as a university experiences that quite a bit. I actually had a friend that I grew up with that played football at BYU. So he told me about his experiences, and this was somewhere in the 2000s, or I can't even remember. It's been so long ago, but in the 90s, late 90s. And so in that situation, in that mindset, I've already had an experience with a guy that's been there. I've lived there. So for me to believe that that is possible, I just don't believe that it would be possible that these people could all be in this arena and there be one person just yelling out racial slurs. All right, maybe somewhere in the middle of Tennessee, back in the Hoosier days, or Indiana, potentially, but not in this day and age, and not with this particular crowd, and not when people being hyper vigilant against these type of racial attacks. Okay, they don't want that stain on their record. So if somebody was doing it, they definitely would probably call it out. Now, here's the next point. I know dealing with basketball crowds or crowds in general, you're going to, if somebody was doing this, somebody probably would have called it out, or they would have stood out, or the 5-10 people around him probably would have whipped out their phones and recorded him doing this, right? She alleges that he was doing it over a 2-hour period. Now, somebody would have recorded it. And even BYU saying, look, if you have evidence to our investigation that we'll disclose later, if you have evidence, namely a recording, these kids whip out their phones with the quickness. All right, they would have posted it on social media at this point. And I'm like, we haven't seen any of these things. So a lot of my experiences aren't aligning with this one. And my experience is also aligning with the fact that she was under the burden of performance and she wasn't performing. They lost this game. Duke lost this game. And that should be a point that everybody should acknowledge. And so in this situation here, here's the young lady right here, Rachel Richardson. She's on the floor. When we find out that this game has been televised, okay, the game has been televised. This is on television, and you have a full capacity crowd in this arena at BYU. And she's going to allege, see, without the evidence, without knowing that this game is on television, without knowing that there's a capacity crowd, without having the experience of living or being in Utah, and without having the experience of being in a game situation where you're on the floor in between lines, without that experience, you just believe it outright. Oh, wow. Yes. Oh, man. This is some days. This is some stuff back in the 1950s, 60s stuff. This is some Texas Western basketball stuff. Nah. And so I don't believe it right off the rip. I didn't believe it because I'm like, this just doesn't match up. And so there's video evidence of it, right? It's not like the Hoosier days where there's no video evidence and they were like, you got to go through the kitchen. You got to go through the back door. You got to get dressed outside, right? There was none of that. All right. They were treating the team as well as they would treat a visiting team. And when she brought it up, she said nobody reacted. Okay. So that's the problem number one. Here's problem number two that they have right here. Okay. Here's problem number two. Now you have the right-wing conspiracy, okay, theory, and that anybody that does not believe that this could happen to her, you're on the right wing. All right. You're on the fringe. You're a conspiracy theorist. When in these situations, these things have happened in recent history. Take Jesse Smollett or Juicy Smollett, whatever the hell his name is. All right. That actor. This is recent experience in which, yes, There have been people who've made up attacks from whites, and then all of a sudden they created the situation. We find out that it did not happen. All right, it was like, nah, it really didn't happen. It didn't go like that. It didn't go down in the DMs like that. So when you're having the evidence against Rachel, you have the situations where people have used these, especially towards election years and specifically for political aim, which Rachel Richardson's godmother has a political advantage, and she's been quite vocal about what's been going on. It's not hard to believe that this could be an absolute lie. So here we are. Here we are. We're dealing with this situation here. You have guys that are now making this political, and anybody that doesn't agree with it, you're a right winger, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a supremacist, and so forth. Here I am, a black man, going, I don't believe it because I just know the circumstances. All right, that's the next problem, because now it becomes political. The results of this is the same thing that happened to Carolyn Bryant. All right, when she accused Emmett Till of this, she had no idea that that would be one of the major sparks of the civil rights movement, of what we know as the civil rights movement. That was one of the biggest stories of that time. Now, she just thought and did what most people did, what Fannie Taylor did at Rosewood in Florida in the 20s. She was like, all right, let me just blame this black kid, and that'll be the end of it, and I'll wash my hands. And it'll just be, they'll just beat him. They'll just teach him a lesson. They'll teach that uppity ninja a lesson, and that'll be the end of it. And then all of a sudden, it's a major news story. Again, collateral damage. She had no idea it would go that far. She probably had no idea that they would deal with Emmett Till, unfortunately, the way they dealt with him. She just thought they would maybe rough him up a little bit. A lot of women do that. I thought they were just going to rough him up. Same thing with Brandy. All right, Richardson. She's thought potentially I'll just make an excuse. The coaches will believe it. They may investigate. All right, they threw a kid out. That's the end of it. No, it's a major news story, and I don't think they anticipated that. But they maybe tried to use it for some political sway, maybe to get maybe a discrimination lawsuit. Who knows? Who knows? But I say initially, she only used it for an excuse for her bad performance. Now, getting into the next problem of this story right here, okay, of this story, you have ESPN, all right, ESPN right now. Here it is right here. Where's ESPN? ESPN's reporting, and women's volleyball is getting a lot of attention, thank goodness, all right, because it's actually a great sport, spectator sport. All right, BYU says it found no corroborating evidence of racial heckling towards Duke's women's volleyball player. Sorry, right here. And of course, people are going to say, well, of course, after an extensive review and self-investigation, of course, they're going to say nothing happened, right? They're going to be like, nothing happened. Of course. I mean, listen, if I'm investigating myself, I'm going to say nothing happened. But of course, here it is right here. BYU investigates themselves. And not only did they investigate themselves, they actually interviewed the players from the BYU volleyball team and players from the Duke volleyball team, fans that sat in that area, and so forth and so on. The people who were involved, the coaches, and from both teams. And also they interviewed some of the police that were around. All right. And then they also, the another crazy thing that they did is they reversed the decision to ban a fan for life. The fan that was supposedly the one throwing out the heckling. All right. They made a decision to reverse the lifetime ban because there was no evidence that this occurred. BYU reviewed the game footage. They reviewed the coaches' game footage. They reviewed the footage without the announcers announcing it, just so they can hone in on all of the conversations that might have gone on here. Now, again, like I said, there could have been someone who said something, but she's just saying that the person said it the entire game, all right, which that's where her point of contention, that's where she's going to lose it. Maybe that person whispered it to her only, potentially, but somebody would have heard it. All right, they would have had to isolate her. She would have to isolate herself, and that to happen for a 2-hour period. All right, so we got that. Now you have the problem of all of these Jay Billises of the world, Stephen A. Smiths jumping on the bandwagons, still supporting Rachel Richardson, still not wanting false alligators to go out there and be punished. There should be some punishment for this young lady. This is how young women learn. The fact that Carolyn Bryant accused Emmett Till of this situation, and then later she said she made it up, and now they're not going to criminally prosecute her, even though she's been on the run for some few years and decades. Now they're like, oh, let's just let bygones be bygones. This sets a negative precedent against false alligators. All right, that's what we call it here on my channel. You're a false alligator. When false alligators are not punished, do not be surprised when people come up with these situations most of the time because they're failing somewhere. All right. They're failing somewhere in life. They're failing somewhere in their performance. They're failing at their job. And then they start false alligating. And this is another situation. So Jay Billis is now saying, well, we still stand with and up for Rachel Richardson. Why? She's a liar. She's a liar, or she's telling a big untruth. Okay, her story ain't panning out, and none of her teammates support her. None of even her own teammates support her. Imagine what she's got to go through with her own damn teammates. All right, that's got to be a team cancer. That's going to fracture the Duke volleyball team for a long time. Now, if it were true allegations, this Duke volleyball team probably could have rode that momentum to a whatever they were going to do, probably do better than they were anticipated in doing. But I guarantee you, this is going to fracture their team. This is going to fracture her relationship with her teammates, especially if her teammates can't trust her, because sports performance is about trust. And in this situation, if they don't have, if she's still on the field or still on the court and they have a lack of trust, it's going to affect their performance. All right. What more about this? There's even more about this. What about Dawn Staley, in which I did a video, the South Carolina basketball coach in this situation? Then she started virtue signaling and then said, I'm going to pull my team off the court. All right. I'm going to take my ball and run instead of going, we're going to face all of this and we're going to stand up to these racial injustices. We're going to do it. We're not going to cower and hide. We're going to go out there and we're going to do it. Okay. So Dawn Staley now, she got some splaining to do. Dawn Staley, you got some splaining to do. You got to find out. Now we got to find out. Now, what's your stance on Rachel Richardson now? Now that the investigation's come along, your athletic director got to be looking at you sideways and going, okay, wait a minute. Now you put us fresh into this damn line of fire when we could have just stayed out of it. Now we're in it because we had a contractual obligation to fulfill by playing basketball games, 2 basketball games in which the capacity crowd would have been outrageous over there. I would have had to go get me a ticket. That would have been the ticket of the year. But anyway, they pulled out of a contractual obligation of a game that's supposed to be happening in less than 2 months. And they were going to return the game. BYU was going to go to South Carolina the next year. Now you pulled out. Now, not only did you do that, now you slandered BYU and you called them a racist institution, in essence, by supporting a story that's panning out to be false. All right. Now you're doing this. And now potentially, I would say, since there was a contract involved, you got a potential lawsuit going on, and your athletic director is going to be like, come on, man. I know you won a national championship, but don't put us on the line of fire like that. Next time when you stand up for some issues, you better have some damn evidence of doing it. And she said she talked to the Richardson family and she talked to all these people. But again, let's just put this in perspective right here. What's happening in our country is people are claiming racism when it's not there. This is a negative black eye to the people who actually have racist things going on to them, right? So it's the same thing as if somebody says they were assaulted, a woman says she was assaulted, right? If it pans out that she's false, all right, sometimes people say, well, that's just one false, and there's not that many false allegations, and the real ones are, well, you actually make it harder for the real victims to come forward. All right, they have a problem with that because real victims don't want to come forward because it's not believable, okay? It's not a believable story. Sometimes when the story's not believable, they just sweep it up under the rug. All right, well, we'll just let that disappear. And that's what the media is doing here. Okay, they're sweeping it under the rug. They're not reporting it. They're not challenging it. They're not asking for information. They're just saying, oh, let's just make this story disappear. And it's despicable. I want to see lawsuits flying. All right, I want to see lawsuits flying. I want to see her suspended. I want to see her lose her scholarship. I want to see her have to withdraw from the university. That's what would happen to many people who are especially males in this situation. They would have to do that. Let me give you a quick history of these situations that have gone on. We talked about Fannie Taylor at the Rosewood incident. This is when white women were doing this, and now black women are doing this. But now you had Fannie Taylor, you had Carolyn Bryant. Okay. Then recent history, you had the Duke lacrosse case. All right. That was similar to this, where there was a black woman saying these white lacrosse players raped her, and it didn't happen. All right. And it was proven to be false, and there was all kind of collateral damage. You got Juicy Smollett, and now you got Brandy Richardson. If you know any other ones, I mean, you can put a whole bunch of them down in the description box below. But this is how despicable it's become. Now people are claiming racism, all right, where it doesn't exist. And even some incidences where it is a situation where a white and a black is involved, they will make it racist. And that actually does racism, the real incidents of racism, that actually puts a black eye on those. Because the minute I speak up and say, well, this happened, they're just going to associate it with that, and people are just going to write it off. All right. You better have some good evidence if it happened. All right. LeBron James might be a situation. Remember, somebody supposedly graffitied all over his wall. We ain't seen nary one picture. Okay. We ain't seen one picture. All right. Imagine you would have seen one. He would have published the book. All right. Where was that? Where was it at? Not one. All right. So in the situation right there, you got to realize that this is something in our country that we have to figure out. Are we going to continue to let these false alligators slide? Okay. Can't continue to do that. All right. What about Nikki Jovino over in the Sacred Heart University in Connecticut? Same thing. All right. She had 2 black men that she involved herself with by consent in the bathroom. She allowed them to run a choo-choo train on her. And then she wanted to protect her reputation for a guy that liked her. And then all of a sudden, she ended up getting punished. Fortunately, she ended up getting punished. But there are obviously situations where we got to correct this. And I think the way to correct it is to punish the false alligator. You heard it here first on the CGA Sports Channel. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We got video games over here. We got the therapy room over here. All right, that's my collection room. And we got the sports updates over here. All right, shout out to the coach gang. I appreciate y'all for being here.